But what I was learning is that the brain is able to change, and improvements can be made through exercising the brain, much in the way we exercise the body, to improve attention, to change the way the brain takes in and processes information. And so I just became incredibly passionate about what can we do to create change at a young age.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us around the world, British Columbia, obviously Canada, it's a beautiful, beautiful province. Prince George, where is it physically? It is 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers, which puts it physically in the center of British Columbia. East to west, north to south. It's a big, big province. Today we have, again, a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Rebecca Jackson, and she is a specialist in the area of brain surgery, or not brain health, and enhancement in how to feel and function. She is a chief program officer. She is an author and has been on many, not only local, regional, but national media in regards to brain health and issues relating to that. Dr. Rebecca Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, John. And I'm so glad that you clarified that I'm a brain health expert, not a brain surgeon. Two very different things. That would be very dangerous for everyone involved.
No, it's all good. I've had one of those on my show too, though. Very, very interesting. So, do you mind if I call you Rebecca?
Please do, please.
Okay. So, Rebecca, maybe first for our guest watching us, I'm in Prince George, British Columbia. Where are you located?
So while I'm a Minnesota native, so I grew up with long winters and lots of snow and outdoor activities, but my family and I now live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we've been in North Carolina for about 15 years and absolutely love it, where we still get winter, but our winters are short and we have lots of sunshine and all four seasons and just a really family-friendly area. And we are able to day trip to the beach. So we live 2 hours from the North Carolina coast, which has some of my favorite beaches that I've been to in the world.
Beautiful area. I've been there. We do a lot of business in the United States. A very, very beautiful area. And having the seasons is very important as well, although not quite as dramatic as they are in some of the other areas where we are. It's winter usually for a good 4 or 5 months of the year, and then obviously the rest. But and then we have a place. My wife, myself, have a place in Victoria, British Columbia, which is also somewhat similar to your climate. It has the seasons, but pretty soon there, it's now nearly February, the flowers are starting to come out and all those kind of things. And then I was
always
born.
Such a hopeful.
Yeah, and then I was born in Holland, in northeastern part of Holland. We'll probably talk about that a little bit as well. So, you have been very involved in brain health in particular, and in fact, you have written a book about it, and I believe the title of the book is Back on Track. And you have a copy of that you can share with us, yeah. And can you put it a little bit more to your left or right? Yeah, so see the title. And that again is available on all major areas, Amazon, on and on and on and on, right? So tell us a little bit about your history, your training, and how did you go to the direction of brain health or specialized in that area?
Yeah, it wasn't what I set out to do, but life is such an interesting journey, and what is important to us at different times of life, I think, has so much to do with what's happening around us. I started my career as a chiropractor. I've always really gravitated towards more holistic and more natural preventative approaches. I think there's absolutely a time and place for modern medicine, and modern medicine has come so far, and we're so grateful for that. But I was the person that if I had a headache, I'd want to understand why I had the headache before I went for the Advil. So I started as a chiropractor, and in my early years as a chiropractor, my patients were young and starting to get married and starting to have kids and families. And so I started to do more coursework and understanding development. And then as a young parent myself, I wanted to learn as much as I could about how to optimize development for my kids. And I was frustrated. I could find books on the importance of singing songs and playing patty cake, but I wanted more. I wanted to know what was happening in the brain to derail development if development went off track, and what was happening to optimize development. And I was fortunate where my mom is a school psychologist, and the more I learned, I would call my mom and say, Mom, what are the schools doing to help kids improve with attention if they're struggling with attention? Or what are the schools doing to change dyslexia if a student has multisensory processing disorders and is struggling to read and learn?
Not
And
much.
I was shocked. Yeah, I was shocked. And my kids weren't school age yet. They were very little. But what I was learning is that the brain is able to change, and improvements can be made through exercising the brain, much in the way we exercise the body, to improve attention, to change the way the brain takes in and processes information. And so I just became incredibly passionate about what can we do to create change at a young age so that kids grow up with fewer challenges. Life is complex and hard enough. And so if we can minimize some of the complications. So that's how I ended up with a company called Brain Balance. And at Brain Balance, we run programs for both kids and adults to strengthen the brain. And a brain that's stronger and more mature has the ability to pay attention longer, block out distractions more effectively, learn more consistently. And so that is where I landed. And in my work there, I've gotten to do a lot of research on what it looks like to improve cognition and attention, improve emotional well-being. So that's just continued to fuel and spark my interest and passion to see firsthand that change is possible, and then be able to quantify that change to say we can measure
So,
it and it's reproducible.
so just to touch a little bit more on the personal side. So you have how many children?
I have two kids. I've got a daughter that just turned 16 and has her driver's license as of
Unbelievable,
two
huh?
weeks ago.
But what's her name?
Unbelievable.
What's her name, by the way? Just
Mor-
what's
yeah,
her name?
Morgan.
Morgan. And then you have a son,
I do. I've got a 14-year-old boy named Drew, who's
Drew.
a hockey player and getting ready for high school next year.
Beautiful ages, right? Just at that level that they starting to find direction and exploring the world.
Oh, it's such a fun age. My son just passed me in height. So just watching them grow and form their opinions, and watching that increase in independence is exciting.
So the that really triggered your interest because your mom already was involved in schooling and dealing with young people, especially as they went forward. Sometimes we don't obviously in I'm 83, so when I grew up, we didn't do any of this kind of stuff, so unfortunately, in a lot of ways, and as you already indicated, we've come a long way since that, and still are going further and further. Is that at what age really, but my understanding always was, is between the ages, the critical ages, all of them obviously, but are for a child to lay the foundation is up to 6 years or so. When that period of life is very critical.
It absolutely is very critical. And some of why it's so critical is because the brain in those early years are going through rapid growth phases where there's so much change happening so quickly. But I think it's so important for parents and adults to understand that even if you didn't optimize or maximize development in that particular window, you don't need to feel stuck. We're seeing that the brain can change at any age. I'm working on a study right now looking at cognition in adults, and we're seeing significant improvement in the areas of sustained attention and inhibitory control in adults. And so while it is important early intervention to get the brain on track as much as possible, to set development up to optimize. If it doesn't happen early, it can still happen. It's not too late. It might take a little bit longer to get there, but we're seeing that change is still possible.
Now, I may be an interesting case for you to kind of look at from here, is saying that I was born November the 1st, 1940 in northeastern Holland. And then I have a sister that was 1 year older than me and a brother 2 years older. And as you already know, the Second World War started in Western Europe in 1940. So my family, then my dad was drafted into the Dutch Army, in April of 1940. And the last time they heard from him is when the bombing of Rotterdam was done, where thousands of people died. And then for 5 years, we didn't know if he was dead or alive. And then my mom had, I was born then November. She was pregnant with me when he left. So she had the 3 kids going through the war years, which were pretty rough in that part of northeastern Holland, in the extreme corner, about 10-15 minutes from the German border. And then just north of us was the North Sea that touched on Germany and Denmark in the northern part of Holland. So it was difficult. So what I still remember as a kid is that when I was 3.5 or 4, hundreds of bombers overhead that were the Allied forces bombing Germany. And what we would do, particularly in the evenings, my mom would take us outside on the flat roof to not just look at the bombers, but she felt safer outside than inside. And the sound of hundreds of bombers is something that even at that age you will never forget, at least I don't. And then in the distance we could see cities burning or the sky be red. And if you kind of visualize northern Holland and northern eastern Germany, that's where Bremen, Kiel, and all the critical areas where they were either having access to the sea or by building equipment. And so they were primary targets, Hamburg and all those kind of places. And then in the winter of 1944-45 they called it the hunger winter, where they had cut off all food supply to most of Holland, and it was probably also the coldest winter on record. So I still remember as a child that the 3 of us, me then around the 5 years old, 6 and 7, we would go with gunny sacks to the railroad yards and pick up anything edible or burnable every day. And the reason that we did as kids, they wouldn't shoot us, they would boot us one, but we just came back the following day. So and then we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to the land of my heroes. And so, and it was
That's beautiful.
And we saw far too much of things that we should not have seen. There was a lot of fighting at the end of the war, where they were pushing the Germans from the landing in Normandy by the Allied forces, pushed them through Belgium and the west side of Holland, and then through the north side, pushed them into Germany. So by the time the fighting got to our area, it became very intense, and they blew up all the bridges behind them, including the one in front of our house, and all those things, and fighting. And then there was a period of no man's land where the underground collected the collaborators and shot them or did things to them, and we were all there. And so that was the kind of history. The other thing, and especially now, that as we watching all the challenges in the world, in the Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, other places. And then sometimes, I've been now in Canada, here in Western Canada and British Columbia, and then do business here in the United States. And then I fly a lot in commercial airplanes. I'm also a pilot, but mainly I'm talking about commercial airflight. I usually sit always on the window, and I look outside, and I say, it's paradise. It simply doesn't get any better in North America, where we have, relatively speaking, peace and tranquility. And the mistake that I believe, or the misunderstanding a lot of people have about war, is that they sometimes have the impression that when the war is over, everything goes back to normal. That's not so. It could take generations before they ever go back to a sense of normality or a sense of normality. Families, in a lot of cases, will never kind of function again the way they used to at one time. I saw that in our family, and as well, and and then I do a lot of public speaking and writing as well, obviously, and I talk about those issues. And then I'm sometimes troubled by the politics that we have, and I don't intend to talk too much about politics other than in the context of where it affects us and those kind of things. If I look at Canada, a democratic country, same as the United States, and then it's not perfect, but it's better than the opposite. And if I see the lack of understanding that a lot of people have, both in Canada and the United States in a way, is that believing that dictatorships are attractive in a way because you got strong leaders and they say this is what we're going to do and blah blah blah. Then say, do not mistake dictatorships are not good. Look at and if you want to visit Russia, North Korea, Iran, and I can go on and on and on and on, then what we have is the best that we can do. We can do better a lot of times, but we still have a democratic country, and we are so fortunate of having, all the stuff that we have in North America, and so the other part that I just want to share with you is that I was academically not very successful. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times, so that was not good. And so they then kind of looked at me and said, and what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were beautiful people. So it was suggested maybe send him to the mentally challenged school, or do we try to get him a job and a trade of some sort? And my grandfather was a master carpenter and my dad managed a small lumber company. So at 13, they sent me to a furniture factory, and then in the evening I would go to school and become a furniture maker. So I became a furniture maker, and I love lumber and all of those kind of things. And then kids among each other are not always nice. Where I had friends with me in grade 7 and several times in grade 7 actually, that all went to college or to university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then it was kind of looked down at. And then I kind of felt I had failed, and not, I was still a very optimistic person, very exceptionally optimistic, usually a nice guy, but deep down I felt I had failed. And so, and then I wanted to kind of start over again, go to Canada, even when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me then, and then I was drafted in the Dutch Air Force. And then again, I already built a career in Holland that was okay and successful to a certain extent. But the issue is always mentally for me is that at some point you hope to get married, you buy a house, you get a nice career and a job. But the question was always, okay, John, this all sounds very good. Where are your diplomas? Well, I didn't have any. So that's a challenge. So then when I was 23, I went to Canada, Western Canada, with a dream of building a lumber mill. And I wanted to start with nothing to prove to me that I could do it. and so and so I took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and $150 Canadian. And then when I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia, that's where all the trees are, and that's where the opportunity. So I flew into Montreal, went across Canada, and by train came to Vancouver, and couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and I went to the immigration office. Fortunately, there was a German fellow there, and I could speak some German. So I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, go to Prince George. It's a boom town. That's where you have to go. So that's where I am today, and as I look out of the window, I can nearly see the Greyhound station where I came off the bus after 14 hours, and I had in my book, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. But what I had lots of is attitude. No matter how tough it is, I always know tomorrow is better, and I'm an optimist. That's what I do. I had passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And work ethic. I work harder than anybody, and what will follow is success. And so that really made a change in my life. The war years, then the decision to go to Canada, to start over again, to come to Prince George, start with nothing. Since that time, that is now nearly 60 years ago, I've done quite well. It's not about my success, but I've done quite well, and have a number of companies and all the other things. But the other part what was really important to me, a couple of things happened, is that in 1990, I was successful in all the things that I did, and people would say to me, "Oh, you're so successful," and blah blah blah. I didn't feel that way. I still felt I had failed even then, and we already had companies and all the other kind of things. And then the other part was that I had difficulty communicating. If I had in my own setting, I could 3 or 4 people, but then if it was outside of that, I was self-conscious, and I was not very good at it. And then somebody suggested to me, you will find this interesting. Ex-sister-in-law, actually, she said, I'm going to take you to Toastmasters. And I said, okay, what are they doing there? She said, well, they speak. And I said, is anybody going to ask me any questions? She said, no, you just sit there and listen to it. I said, okay. So I went to there, and I sat down and I listened to them. And in the middle of the meeting, they said, hey, John, and I'll tell us about you. I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. But I stayed, and I came back, and I was there for 10 years and became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level in Toastmasters. Just for our global people that are watching us, Toastmasters is an organization that is mainly started in North America for many, many years ago. It's probably 450,000 people that participate. Even Prince George has about 3, 4, 5 Toastmaster clubs. I'm sure your area has them. They have it all over the place. Mainly developing skill sets of communication, interaction. Speaking is one part of it. Listening is another very important part of it, and thinking and speaking on your feet. And as you develop that business, Robert's Rules of Order, and all of those kind of things are part of it. So it's an amazing organization, and probably around the world, probably 10 million people at some point were part of Toastmasters, took part of it, but not too many go as far as I did, and probably less than 1% goes to that level. For me, it was very, very important, changed my life. Then the other thing that happened, and I just want to tell you this in the back so you have an idea of who is this guy, is that when I was in 1997, when I was 57 years old, I walked into a bookstore here, and for some reason or another, I picked up a book, and I opened the book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. And it was about ADHD, written by Dr. Halliwell. And I said, oh my God, that's me. I bought the book, I wrote in the book, in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. Now I finally know who I am. So, and the more I knew about it and looking at Google and doing all those things, so at the same time I'm building these companies and I go to the banks and I negotiate, and I was very good at all of those kind of things, and then what am I going to do? Negotiate a deal and saying this is all very good, John, but I have to tell you one thing, I have a mental issue, it's called ADHD, and they say, well, have a nice day. Although that did not happen, but mentally in my mind, potentially it was then not very well understood. It took me 5 years, Rebecca, before I went to my doc, which was a personal friend, delivered our 2 daughters, and I came into his office and he said, hey John, why are you here? I said, I was then 62, and I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we looked at it together, and yeah, I do. So since that time, obviously, that probably was the critical point for me in my life. I was going through the threshold of change, combining all those big and different phases, the Second World War and the effect of that, PTSD in a child, actually. I got counseling for that in my 50s, actually, very emotional. And then combining all those things together. So since that time that I was 62, I'm 83 now, 6 years ago, people said to me, you've done so many things and blah, 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 why don't you write a book? And I tried that several times. As you well know, writing books is not easy. And so I started, stop, and and about 5, 6 years ago, if I don't do it now, it won't happen. So I wrote this book. I'm going to sign them for you, and I'm going to send you copies of this. But I wrote a book called Against All Odds. It's not about my success, just the opposite of staying the course, never give up, and all the ups and downs. And so being quite successful. Now, the one thing with the autobiography is that, and especially for somebody like me, English is not my mother tongue. Actually, even High Dutch is. And I grew up in speaking dialect, and so most of Holland don't understand our dialect. So I had to acquire. I love speaking dialect, and so I had to acquire speaking High Dutch. By the time I got that part under control, I'm in Canada. I have to start all over again speaking English. Anyway, but I'm just making fun of it. So with the autobiography, you cannot write one, and then after 6 months you say, I don't like it, I'll do another one. No, you got one crack at it, better do it right. And so I did that one, and then the other part, ADHD, what troubled me so often is that obviously it was part of my life, always has been part of my life. I'm proud of it. I call it a superpower now. And I speak about it, not only, but in a lot of settings I do speak about it, and I felt I had to write a book about it. So I did. ADHD Unlocked, and it's written by the ADHD mind. You can open it up anywhere, go either that way or that way, it doesn't really matter. It's always interesting no matter how you look at it. So I did that one. And that's been, now the part about this one, again, think in terms of Dr. Halliwell. I have a great deal of respect for him. He wrote about 18 books, about 5 in the series of Distraction. I had him on my podcast last week. And if you're interested in it, you should watch it. It's very, very interesting one. So we concluded this is that I felt that, by the information that I gathered, that about 8% of the population are affected by a benefit from, or whatever way we look at it, is about 8%. Since that time, I kind of think it's more than 20%. And then talking to Dr. Helleveld when we talked about it, he said, no, John, it's probably more than 25%. Now the other part, and then we thought maybe male and female, I've in my experience found that there is no difference between the occurrence of male and females. They just projected differently. Then the males tend to outward do it, and the female more inwardly. But you're the expert, not me. I just want to share all of this with you because it makes it interesting. And so that part, and then the other interesting part is that I believe that 50% of the successful, the operative here is successful, CEOs and entrepreneurs are ADHD. And I shared that with Dr. Helleveld. He said, no, John, more than 75% in his mind. So anyway, so there, so since that time, so now the other one, I have to share this one with you before, and I just want to give you this background because it's so interesting, especially having somebody like you. So a lot of times I talk to young people about, and other people, I know so many people that are mid-age or whatever they are, they hate their jobs. I say, change. Because if you hate your job, you take it home, it becomes part of your life. Don't do. And then to young people, I say, I do a lot of presenting to younger people and saying, what you going to do with your career? They say, well, I don't know. I said, well, how will you find the process of finding out? I said, what you should do, my suggestion would be, think about something that you may like. You want to be a welder, or you want to be a truck driver, you want to be an accountant, or you want to be, a lawyer, or you want to be an entrepreneur, or whatever. Talk to them and find out what are the benefits. And a lot of them would love it if you asked them for a coffee or so, And so I felt I had to be more, because it is so critically important to make the decision. So I felt I had to write a book about that too. So I did. So this is the one.
Love it.
Yeah, and then I'm doing another one, so that I'm working on now. That's coming out next July, and that's important. You may find this one interesting because you believe in fitness, health, mental, and diet and all of those kind of things, and not age to me is not important. Quality of life is, and I know already that's the way you think. So I'm writing a book about that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I can. Oh, that's fantastic.
So
You are one busy guy.
I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and was competing for qualified for competing in the nationals and the Arnolds, and then COVID came. Now I'm training again for 2025 to go to the Arnolds, and I'm training again for that. So the story is this one, is that it took me till, and that's really the point that I want to make, what effect, I was affected by the war years, obviously, and what followed in the families, to make that decision for me to find confidence to go here. By pure coincidence, ended up going Toastmasters, which unlocked me in terms of my abilities that I had, and then being successful in business. And then since that time, I've been writing books and been speaking, obviously, and then I'm very active on podcasting as well. And some people say to me, how do you do all of that? You run 10 companies and then you do this and do all these other kinds of things. I say ADHD. That's why I do it. And that's how I can do it. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, what an incredible story. And listening to your early years in Holland, having read history books through class and just reading on my own, it is different hearing the story from a firsthand perspective. It brings it to life in an emotional and rich way that history books just can't. And you're absolutely right, where that does have an impact on a developing brain. And I think about that all the time when we're watching what's happening in the Middle East or in Russia and the Ukraine. Trauma impacts the developing brain. And I'll tell you, the first time that it really struck home with me, at Brain Balance, we've done assessments on over 150,000 students. So there's data and patterns and trends that you see. And that data tells a story. It brings things to life once you're familiar with the data. And so if it's a child that's presenting with ADHD or high functioning autism or sensory processing disorders, you see certain trends in the data. And I was sitting down with a parent, and this data was just presenting different. And this was a girl who was struggling with emotional regulation, struggling with attention and impulse control. She was having challenges with friends. There were just struggles all across the board. And she was probably in that like 10 to 12-year-old range at this time. And I made the comment to her mom of, it's just interesting that every single aspect of her development that's age-based is coming in at age 6. It's like her development is frozen at age 6. And her mom teared up. And then she shared the background and story of a horrendous traumatic event that had happened in that child's life at 6 years of age. And so then you have this beautiful girl whose body continued to develop biologically, but in so many areas of development was frozen at age 6. And she had been in counseling and therapy, and the parents were doing everything they could to support and help this child. And so to see it in the data where trauma did freeze some aspects of development. Now, working with this child, we were able to push through to unlock some of that development so it could continue to move forward. And she continued with counseling, but absolutely, when as a child or an adult, when you go through not just a traumatic event, you went through 5+ years of a series of traumatic events in early times, that does have an impact on the developing brain. We also know that chronic stress drains so many of our resources. So when we're worried and when you're in a stressful environment, the brain goes on hypervigilance, hyper alert. So the brain is having to process more information because the brain doesn't know when to trust the environment. And so your brain's going to take in everything all at once in order to decide, is this safe? Do I know what to expect? Can I relax? Can I learn? Can I interact? And so we know that chronic stress impacts the developing brain. We know trauma impacts the developing brain. And so you had a series of complications that would complicate an already complicated process. I think for any child or adult to end up with on-track development is amazing because it is such a complex process. And I agree with what you were mentioning, Dr. Hallowell was sharing, is we know that when we look at kids, about 10% of the population qualifies for the diagnosis of ADHD, but we know an additional 17% is considered subthreshold, meaning they're falling just shy of the diagnostic criteria, but maybe struggling with a lot of the same pieces. And so you add that together, and now suddenly we're at 27% of the population of kids with ADHD. And we saw this during the pandemic when there was a change in how we functioned day to day. There was an increase in chronic stress. There was a decrease in varieties of sensory exposures and experiences. We saw greater delays starting to take place in development. So what we do on a daily basis and our environment is absolutely instrumental for how the brain comes together to grow and develop. And you did a phenomenal job throughout your life of landing in places that forced you to use networks and pathways. And so you shared that while you struggled to learn some aspects in school and needed repetition and didn't internally feel successful with those things, and landing in a place like Toastmasters, which Toastmasters would increase your awareness of self, of what are you good at, what do you need to work on, what do you need to change. And then through that repetition of practicing and utilizing those pathways, you had an opportunity to strengthen those. So such a fascinating personal story. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing your words and wisdom and life experiences and all the books that you've written. I've done it once. I can't imagine sitting down and doing it again over and over, although I'm sure someday soon I will. But, I think about if we shift to the topic of awareness, you talk about ADHD as your superpower, which absolutely, when you have a brain that is jumping, your thoughts are jumping and bouncing, there's incredible brainstorming capacity there. And ADHD has nothing to do with intelligence or success. It can make some areas more difficult. We know that an individual with ADHD struggles more with task switching, where you're, doing one thing. You're in the middle of writing and your phone dings, so you go to check your phone, and there's a higher likelihood that the ADHD brain forgets to go back to complete that first task. So we know there could be challenges with task switching. But then there's the beauty of that brain that is brainstorming and jumping from idea to idea. What I want kids to know growing up and adults as well is to understand the different nuances of attention. We have different types of attention that we use in different environments, and making sure that we're using the best kind of attention for that moment so that we get the most out of that social interaction or the most out of that biology lecture in college. And then if we can be aware of what type of attention we're using, that can give us direction of what do I need to do to support myself so I can be successful in this moment. And I don't have to feel like I'm less than. So I think there's such power in understanding and building awareness, and then using that information directionally to say, what does my brain need right now so that I can accomplish the task or achieve my goal, whether it's short term or long term.
Yeah, very much so. That I believe that, in talking to Dr. Halliwell as well about that, it is not a negative ADHD. It can very well be a positive, and so then it becomes a question of understanding. Impulsivity is one of them. The other things that people have. ADHD, they forget appointments necessarily, can have a habit of being sometimes late and blah. So, but you can train yourself for it. I'm seldom late because I'm aware of that. Impulsivity, to me, I've trained myself not to do that, and it's not so easy that I say it. That's why it's a way of life that does that for me. And but the benefits of it are that I have an amazing memory. I'm a very good speaker and presenter, obviously with passion and all the other things, and so the benefits. And then the other part likely is that people that respectfully that are trained and educated and in a framework of, say, business, is that they tend to think in a box. And where I become sometimes uncomfortable to those individuals, I tend to think outside of the box. And so what happens, and that makes some of the people uncomfortable. Not for me, as I own all my companies, and I think outside of the box. That's what I do. I'm very good strategically. I can say that now at 83 because I know it from my experience. I'm a good presenter. I'm a good speaker, obviously. Thank you, Toastmasters. I have confidence now. Not overconfidence, but I have an obligation to share. I don't want to see others. If I can help other people to become aware, then I have an obligation to share some of these things. That's why this is so important, you and me having dialogue. And the interesting part about that, we know already, and I'm saying that from Miss Confidence, tens of thousands of people are watching this conversation. That's the beauty of podcasting, is that, that you and me sitting here now and sharing our expertise on your part and my knowledge of life, really, and all those people sharing that with us around the world has, I believe, I have an obligation to do that, and I love that and I enjoy that. The other part that I should share with you is, for one of my companies, we're looking for a senior individual in senior management. So we advertised all across Canada and other places, and so the advertisement kind of laid out the role, and then I added to that ADHD will be considered a benefit. Or I know I said will be considered an asset, so,
Yeah.
and that's how I
I
feel
love
about
it. And, well, and I love the moment that we're in right now where, and I feel like this changed during the pandemic is ADHD before there was a stigma attached. It's the same with mental health. And I feel like we're at a point in time where that stigma is starting to drop. Mental health is brain health, and we all have a brain. So brain health and mental health is all of us. ADHD is attention, and we all pay attention all day, every day. It's understanding those nuances. And so I hope that we're at a point where that stigma is lessening and there's an increase in understanding. And one of the things that I encounter often with parents is parents reach out when they're at a point of pain. There's something that's not going well. Maybe they're getting phone calls from the school because of disruptive behavior in the classroom, or they're spending hours on homework and their child's still struggling in a subject. They reach out when there's a pain point where something needs to change and they don't know what to do about it. And parents have this fear of not wanting to take away the gifts, the beauty of who their child is, but then seeing these pain points and challenges. And it's interesting, John, listening to you talk over decades throughout your life, you've figured out the systems and strategies to help you be successful, to ensure that you're on time when you own 10 companies and have meetings and so many different things going on. And so you've gotten to harness the creativity and the hyper focus and the drive that you carry internally, a part of that being part of your ADHD, but then paired that with support systems to allow you to be successful. That takes time and maturity to be able to recognize what's needed and put it in place. Our kids have a harder time with that. Over years, they'll develop that. So I think as parents, that's where we get to step in to provide some structure. And I think it's important to understand is when we have an individual with ADHD and we're working to strengthen and mature parts of the brain that help to sustain attention and focus for longer, block out distractions, improve inhibition, it doesn't take away from the strengths. It's not an either or. You don't lose creativity that comes from that because you've also strengthened the pathways for sustained attention. And so I think sometimes for parents, I think there's this fear of not accepting their child exactly the way they are, or fear of taking away from the gifts that they have by working to strengthen some of the aspects of ADHD that are contributing to challenges. And as you shared yourself, it's taken decades into your life for you to internally feel successful, even though you could look back over a lifetime of achievements from a very young age to be a 13-year-old working in a lumber yard, learning how to build furniture and loving that and embracing that. You had successes along the way, but still internalized sense of lower confidence. So for our kids to be able to strengthen areas of challenge, I think can help to minimize some of those internal struggles. And the more mature we are developmentally, the more effective we are at putting in those compensatory strategies and systems to give us the framework to be successful. So you can have both the creativity and hyper focus and drive that comes along with ADHD while still strengthening some of the areas that can create some complication.
And now even what happens, Rebecca, over and over again, even doing my podcasting that I've done several hundred of them, I find that my guests, because I speak about these things very openly and as part of our discussions, that they said, I haven't told anybody this, but I have ADHD. I cannot tell you how many that has happened. I did a presentation to about 30 or 40 people, and they had invited 3 people to talk about the lumber industry in British Columbia, and I was the last speaker. And so the other ones talked about it, and I said, I'm not going to talk about the lumber, I'm going to talk about something else, and that is writing books and ADHD in particular. And when I did the presentation, during the presentation, and already before when I said that I was going to talk about it, one fellow sitting next to me said, I got ADHD, I haven't told anybody. I said, oh, I'm going to mention it. So at least 3 people in the room said, hey, I have ADHD. And so the importance to me more than anything is that I had the strength, as you already pointed out, from a difficult beginning, going through, failing, if you wish, grade 3, grade 7, and 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 then still not feeling that I had the ability to succeed, and that carrying the feeling of failure, but still was an optimist. But the but unlocked it really is a number of things. The one was postmaster, the other one was finding out ADHD, and all of us. So I'm trying to share in my books, podcasting, and presentations that I give about different topics, but I always include ADHD to a certain extent because I have an obligation to do that, and it encourages others. I did a presentation for probably I don't know how many people were there, a couple hundred or so, and so I included ADHD, and then before I did that, the day before, I was in the hotel bed I was staying in. A fellow walked up to me and said, when you finish with your dinner, can I talk to you for a few minutes? I said, sure. Where are you sitting? He said, I'm sitting down there. So I walked over to his table, and then he said to me, and I gave out a lot of my books for free, ADHD and the other ones. And he said, I received one of your books, and he was a counselor of one of the cities here in the neighborhood. And he said, my son at 15 has been struggling with this and has a lot of problems with it. And so I got your book, and we read it together.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I hear that so often, or where I give presentations, and then I put everything into it, and then at the end of the presentation, including this, and they say, darn, I wish I had it too, because and the other part that is important to me is that I say to young people in particular, create confidence, believe in you. You are special, each and every one of you. A lot of them feel that they don't look right, they don't dress right, and this is not right. I said, everybody is special. Create that confidence that you are special, and should be pursuing what you like, and then with ADHD and some of these other things that to create confidence is very, very critical, and one of the more important parts. And then our schooling needs changes and has challenges, and I write about that a little bit in the book as well. So.
Well, I think you're touching on something so important. Is ultimately human nature. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel connected. We want to feel like we fit in. And I think when you've got an area where you're struggling or challenging, it's easy to internalize that and start that dialogue of what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why can everybody else pass grade 7 and I can't? And so I think there can be relief in that diagnosis to say, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. But here's a context or a framework to understand who you are in some areas where you might have to work a little bit harder, and some areas where you're naturally going to excel, and how do you find the balance of that. But I think there's such relief in knowing and understanding what that is, and then the importance of that human connection. I love the Harvard happiness study where it talks about there's nothing more impactful to our happiness is purpose and passion to provide fulfillment and human connection. And so to understand who you are and how you fit into the world, I think can give a sense of calm and relief that can give you a way to connect with people. You're connecting with people by sharing your very personal story that's allowing others to connect to that story, to relate to it, to resonate with it. And then you're also giving them the power and permission to share about something that they maybe haven't shared. And there's a really interesting trend happening right now of parents getting diagnosed alongside their kids. So they have a child that's struggling, and as a parent, we will do anything and everything we can for our kids. And so the parent is bringing their child in to learn about, what can brain balance do to help these challenges, or going to a place to be diagnosed. And the parent is going through this process saying, oh my gosh, this is me. I never thought about that in that context.
Which is great.
It's so real. It's so honest. And I I talk about all these things in my book. My book is really focused on kids of development, and understanding what's on track and what we can do to optimize development. It's not about fixing what's broken or wrong. It's about how do we strengthen what we have to get the most out of it so we can feel and function at our very best every day. But if we all have a brain, then the book applies to you, understanding how our environment and how we function on a daily basis either chips away at our current abilities or helps to optimize them, and then helps to build towards even maximizing and improving who we are over time.
Show us your book once more, Rebecca. So,
So
and that is available on all major areas, Amazon and all the other ones, and you have a website as well, or a contact point?
I do. You can find out more at brainbalance.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Rebecca Jackson. I've got a website that's also drrebeccajackson.com. Or on LinkedIn, Rebecca Jackson. And my passion is helping people understand who they are, and then looking at what can we do to optimize who you are today, and then build towards building and maintaining optimal brain health and well-being going forward.
And then I'm going to do the same with mine, is that just to show our people, Against All Odds is an autobiography. It's about the ADHD mind from the day I was born, virtually going through all the ups and downs, and then still finding self-confidence late in life. It's in success, and showing that in spite of it all, to attitude, passion, work ethic, but will follow is success, and to believe in who you are. So the book is available in all major medias as well. The other one is close to my heart in the sense that it is ADHD Unlocked. I say it is a superpower, and amazing, and a very, very important book in my opinion. And the other one is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, because it is so critically important to. I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late, even now at 83, and I always make my bed, and then and then whatever happens during the day, I'm used to dealing with crises. We just solve the problem and then we go forward, and so every day is a good day, and giving back to culture is important. Giving back to your community and being part of it, and giving back to younger people that are challenging and looking for direction. And then the other one is, this one is coming out this year, Living Young, Dying Old, and saying everything is possible. I want to show you one more thing. I don't know if I can show it to you or not. If not, can you read what is underneath that book, what it cost?
I can't. I can see the barcode, but not.
$25.47.
That was how much you had in your pocket starting your lumber industry in
So all
British
my books
Columbia.
are $25.47, but I'm going to sign them and send them to you for free. So we'll get them out of the door on Monday.
I can't wait, and I'll do the same. It was just an absolute pleasure visiting with you, John, and I can't wait to read your books. The challenge is going to be, which one do I read first? I think I want to start with ADHD Unlocked.
We'll stay in touch, Rebecca, and it was an amazing discussion, and I want to stay in touch, and we're going to make a note that at least 6 months from now we again stay in touch. I'll send you another copy of the book, and then
I'd love that. And I'll have some research publishing right about that time, looking at adults and cognition. So that'll be a fun time to have a conversation.
Excellent. Amazing podcast. It was a privilege. Thank you, Rebecca, and to the people watching us from around the world, Dr. Rebecca Jackson. Read her book. Check her out on her website. Amazing story, especially now looking at a changing world, recognizing brain health so critically important in who we are and what we do. Rebecca, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.